So I had worked for Chuck Jones, I had worked for Abe Levitot, I had worked for Richard Williams on a feature. Where was up from there? Well, up was Walt Disney Studios. So in April of 1977, I got into the Eric Larson animation training program and began what would become a very long career at Walt Disney Studios. Eric was very different from Ben, but every bit as wonderful. He was a quiet man, not prone to telling funny, wacky stories like Ben was, but he had the greatest bedside manner. He had wonderful, wonderful teaching skills, and I learned so much from him, and he was a very gentle man. You would stand behind him as he would go over your drawings, and he would hold that pencil so lightly. He didn't draw like this. He drew with his arm. It was, and his line was so light. He could just break your drawing down into the simplest form, the simplest silhouette, the simplest pose. He could, his drawings weren't fancy or they wouldn't knock you out with their draftsmanship, although he could really draw if he wanted to. He drew what he needed to draw in order to show you how to make it better. And back then, the animation training program was an 8-week do or die period of time. You would go in, you would start the first day, they would take you into, I had a room, it was a really nice room. It was an office on the second floor. Eric was on the second floor of the animation building, the same building where every film after Bambi was done in this building. You have your animation desk, a Disney animation desk that you're working on. And back in my day, we were even working on only Disney paper. The punches on that paper were only at Disney Studios. They had their own whole arrangement. You were to come up with your own idea for a test to show personality, hopefully Disney personality. And you had 4 weeks to animate a pencil test. It could be as long or as short as you want it, as long as it showed something that Disney was looking for. So I had picked Little John from Robin Hood. I had memorized this walk that Milt Kahl had animated of Little John in Robin Hood. And Eric knew exactly which walk I was trying to capture, and he taught me this unbelievably simple way to plot it out. He wasn't going to animate it for me, but there was this unbelievably simple way to plot it out. And then all you had to do is kind of fill in the blanks. Anyway, I nailed it. And the test was a success, and it was nerve-wracking because that test was going up in front of Frank Thomas, Ollie Johnston, Willie Reitherman, Eric, a guy named Mel Shaw. Who else? There were only very famous Disney people on the judging committee, but it was a success. The test went well. And then you go through another 4 weeks, and I got through that. And then they throw you on production. And especially me, they threw onto production. After that, they kind of put you through another training program to be like an in-betweener. But I had already been an assistant to Art Babbitt. So they threw me right onto Pete's Dragon, which was being done then. I guess I would think I was doing breakdowns, maybe even assistant work. I was doing roughs, and I don't know if I did any cleanup. I think I was only doing assistant work for the rough animation that was being produced on Pete's Dragon. Then eventually we all went on to the Fox and the Hound, and I became an animator about halfway through that production. And I was doing a lot of scenes with Todd the Fox as a puppy and Copper as a puppy. I did a lot of running scenes at first, which was a good, they're not going to give you the juicy stuff right off the bat. But by the end, I was getting more important scenes. And it's funny how you're going along animating, and you'll get a scene that's kind of a game changer, where they give you something that's harder, and you manage to do it, and then you went up a rung. And that scene in Fox and the Hound was there's a moment. I actually animated some of the scenes leading up to this moment, where it's now grown-up Todd, and accidentally he has been chased out onto a trestle track with a train. And Chief, the other dog, kind of the mean dog, has chased Todd up onto the trestle track, and he's gotten hit by the train, and he breaks his leg. And the hunter is really angry and feels that Todd maliciously lured Chief up onto the trestle track, when in fact that wasn't the case. And he comes over the following night to go face to face with the widow Tweed about how he's going to get his revenge on Todd because Todd maliciously hurt his dog. And there's this moment where you see Todd sleeping in a basket. It's a quiet moment. He's in the house of the widow Tweed, and he animalistically, that sixth sense that animals have of impending danger, he senses that the hunter is on his way over to the house to have this showdown. And he's asleep, and he wakes up, and he goes through these sort of animal, like, I feel something, I sense something, I can't see it, but I can, my animal instincts are telling me. And he eventually jumps out of the basket and hides under the stove in the house. And it was a scene that was kind of long, and there's no dialogue, but I had to get across this feeling that an animal senses danger. And that was, for me, was a big leap in my evolution as an animator. Mm-hmm. So after the Fox and the Hound, there was already a film in development called The Black Cauldron. Black Cauldron is based on 6 books called the Prydain Chronicles. And while we were on Fox and the Hound, we were all reading it and getting very excited about The Black Cauldron. It was kind of a poor man's Lord of the Rings, or poor man's Hobbit. But they were good stories. They were really fun, and we were really excited about it. It was sort of going to be our big epic movie. Before too long, it became clear that the 3 directors and the 1 producer, and they were doing a terrible job. They were taking what could have been a great story and making some very peculiar decisions, and the potential for the film seemed to be going in the wrong direction. At the same time, fortunately, there was this little movie that was also in development that a wonderful story man was working on, called Mickey's Christmas Carol. And his name was Burny Mattinson. And he had been Eric Larson's assistant at one time. He had been an animator at one time, but he had now been working in story for a very long time. And he pitched this idea for doing the Dickens Christmas Carol using Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and Scrooge and Goofy and a lot of other great characters. So there was this quandary about, well, which project would I most like to work on? And all right, Glenn Keane was already going to work on Mickey's Christmas Carol. Randy Cartwright was already going to work on Mickey's Christmas Carol. The crew was going to be very small and very select, and Burny hadn't chosen everybody yet. There was this very young animator that had just come out of CalArts, who had barely worked at the studio. His name was Mark Henn. And he immediately showed signs that he was going to be something special. And he had a special talent for drawing Mickey Mouse. So Mark was already going right out of being like an in-betweener on the Fox and the Hound to being an animator doing Mickey on Mickey's Christmas Carol. So I came off of Fox and the Hound, and if you wanted to promote yourself specifically to doing a character on a film, you'd spend your nights and weekends doing a personal test. That was the way you got somewhere where you wanted to go. So the hero in the Black Cauldron is this boy named Taran. He's kind of a 16-year-old kid, 15, 16-year-old kid. He's going to be the hero, you know, sword and sorcery and all that. And I did a personal test because I thought, oh, this is, you know, I got a shot at being maybe the lead on Taran. Why not? So I did a test of Taran, and I showed it specifically to Rick Rich, who looked at it and went, oh, you've gone far too broad with your animation. We're going to be pulling back on, we're not going to be doing stuff like that. And I nodded and acknowledged his critique, and I came out of his office and thought to myself, I can remember this like it was yesterday. I got to get off this movie. I got to get onto Mickey's Christmas Carol, because there was nothing that broad about what I was doing with Taran. I just thought, oh my God, I got to get off this movie. This is death. If this is the way they're going to direct. So I quickly switched gears, and I didn't know Burny that well. Obviously, I knew Eric very well, but once I had to earn my way onto Mickey's Christmas Carol. I mean, I'm going to try to rub shoulders with Glenn Keane, Randy Cartwright. Both guys had already been animators. Both of them had been supervising animators at the studio. It was just, you know, the people that Burny was getting on were a really high grade of animator. The Bluth gang was long gone. And we were down to there were only like 25 animators in the whole studio. So oh boy, did I burn the midnight oil doing another test, this time with Scrooge McDuck. And I showed it to Burny, and it was good enough. Let's just put it this way. I don't think it was that great, but Burny could see the passion and the effort. And he invited me onto the production, which was like, oh my God, this is so great. And it was great. It was great for so many reasons. Getting to animate Scrooge. I did a lot of Donald Duck. I actually did a couple of scenes of Jiminy Cricket. There were only like 6 animators on the whole thing. So everybody got their sequence, got a whole sequence, like a whole chunk. And in those days, a supervising animator wasn't assigned to one character. You got assigned a chunk, and you did all the characters in every scene. So it was a very different system back then. So I got a chunk when Scrooge McDuck goes up to his bedroom at night for the first time, and is real paranoid. He's looking for ghosts everywhere. He eventually gets into the bed, and Jiminy Cricket comes to visit him. That was my chunk. That was we all worked on sequence 1. We all worked on Scrooge in the counting house. Donald Duck comes to visit him. I did the stuff where Donald comes in, and in that same section, Moley and Rat from Mr. Toad, they come in as solicitors, but it's mostly Scrooge, a lot of Scrooge, and Mark Henn did all of Mickey in that section. And then when we get into sequences 2, 3, and 4, and 5, everybody took a chunk. So it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. Burny was the greatest to work for. And more importantly, that was a year where we didn't have to work on the Black Cauldron.